And it was off to Troy for 9 long years. The war went on, battle after battle, with no hope. This was for 2 reasons. The first was that King Priam of Troy had many sons, but none was greater than Hector, who was almost as great a warrior as Achilles. No one could best him in battle, and Hector and Achilles could never get near each other to actually face off against one another. The other advantage the Trojans had was that the walls of Troy had been built by the gods of Olympus themselves, and they could not be breached from the outside. And so, for 9 years, day after day, the Greeks and the Trojans slaughtered each other until, in the 9th year of the war, and here is where the Iliad begins, a raiding party on one of the temples outside of Troy eventually resulted in King Agamemnon and Achilles fighting over a woman they had taken captive as a slave. Agamemnon stole Achilles' rightful prize of the maid Briseis. Now, to our modern sensibilities, fighting over who gets the slave woman probably doesn't sound all that heroic. But please remember, the ancient Greeks had a different standard of morality than we do now. It was perfectly all right back then. Achilles was so full of rage, he was ready to kill Agamemnon, but was stopped from doing that by the goddess Athena. So Achilles, whiner that he is, went off to pout in his tents and refused to fight anymore. The Greeks were not too happy with this, as it gave the Trojans the advantage. They'd never been happy about having to fight this war over an unfaithful wife, and now their chance for victory just left the field of battle. Both sides decided to get desperate and try to resolve the whole thing through a one-on-one duel between Menelaus and Paris over who would get Helen. But it only ended with Paris, coward that he is, running back to Troy to make love to Helen. Why? I don't know. It's not like he won the battle. At this point, Hector rallies the Trojans and pushes the Greeks back to their ships. Desperate, Agamemnon swallows his pride and tries to apologize to Achilles and sends several of the Greek generals bearing lots of gifts to Achilles. But Achilles has none of it, as he begins to think that sailing home and living a long life might be better than dying at Troy and having his fame live forever. But as Hector pushes the Greeks to destruction, Achilles' closest friend, mentor, and lover, Patroclus, asks Achilles if he can wear Achilles' armor and use it to rally the Greeks to victory. Achilles agrees, and Patroclus does push the Trojans back. However, Hector, seeing the armor of Achilles, kills Patroclus, thinking it is Achilles. Upon hearing his closest friend is dead, the rage of Achilles switches targets, and Achilles goes after Hector with a vengeance. Gods even try and stop him, but nothing gets in his way of killing Hector, which he does. But Achilles' anger is so great that he chooses to continue to hate Hector, tying Hector's corpse to his chariot, and while Patroclus' death is mourned in the Greek camps for 12 days, Achilles drives his chariot around the camp every day to mutilate the body, and lets the dogs have it at night. The story of the Iliad ends with King Priam coming to Achilles and pleading for the body of his son, reminding Achilles of the grief his own father will soon face at hearing his son's death. And with his words, Priam ends the rage of Achilles, the driving force of the Iliad, and takes Hector's body back home to Troy to be burned on a pyre. But there was still a year left to the war at Troy. Soon after, Paris shoots an arrow from the wall of Troy and strikes Achilles' heel, his one vulnerable spot, instantly killing him. It's good to know Paris was good for something. Soon after this, Odysseus comes up with a way to get past the walls of Troy. The Greeks build a giant wooden horse to honor the god Poseidon, or so they say, who is the god of oceans and horses. as if to ask for a safe voyage home. The Greeks pretend to sail home. The Trojans, doing the pious thing, decide to take the horse into the walls of Troy to the temple of Poseidon. Unbeknownst to them, Odysseus and several of the Greeks are hiding within the horse. That night they climb out of the horse, open the gates of Troy, while everyone in the city slept. The Greeks quickly sailed back as planned and entered the city. Then they proceeded to loot, burn, maim, rape, murder, and in general destroy all of Troy. Sadly for the Greeks, in their sacking of Troy, they burned the temples of Athena and Poseidon, their strongest supporters for the last 10 years. The gods, not too thrilled with this, bring up a huge storm that kills many of the Greeks on their way home and delays others from getting home in a timely fashion. In particular, it takes Odysseus another 10 years to make it home to his wife. But that is another epic in of itself. So all of this for one golden apple and one beautiful woman.